Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth, its sacrament, and service, its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Amen.
Though I may speak with bravest fire, and have not gift to all inspire, and have not love, my words are vain, as Sunday grass and hopeless gain. Though I may give all I possess, and striving so my love profess, but not begin my love within, the prophet soon turns strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control, our spirits long to be made whole. Let inward love guide everything. By this we worship and are free.
There once lived a man named Aziz, who was known to all as a great gossip. Aziz could be found day or night in the market or tea shops, telling the latest, often untrue, stories of who did what in every part of town. He spread rumors, passed judgment, told tales, and sowed seeds of disharmony. Some days when his stories came back to him, as they always do, even he knew he was getting out of hand. So his friends decided to send him to Nasruddin, their local wise man. Nasruddin wasn't very helpful at first, having a similar problem himself, but finally he thought of a plan. "Bring me a chicken from the market," he told Aziz, "and hurry quickly, and you must make sure it is cleanly plucked, with not a feather remaining on it." Aziz went off to the market and purchased the chicken, after which the seller began the laborious job of plucking. Then Aziz became impatient. He grabbed the chicken and immediately returned to Nasruddin, pulling out the remaining feathers as he walked back. He entered Nasruddin's doorway and handed him the chicken. Nasruddin put it down and demanded that Aziz go back and bring him all the chicken feathers. "Impossible!" cried Aziz. "By now the feathers are scattered halfway across town." "It is like this with your words, too, Aziz. As soon as you open your mouth to sow a tale, it flies out like the wind carries these feathers. It spreads across town, and nothing can retrieve it. You must beware the feathers that fly from your tongue, and not fill the air with them." Aziz returned home, chastened by this. Apologetic to his friends and community, he took more care when plucking his words.
People are interesting, and we're interested in each other. In spiritual community, we come together very intentionally to be interested in each other, to not just know each other better, but to share our lives more deeply and vulnerably, to mark the sacred moments of life's passage, and to care for one another in all that comes. Along with all of that, of course, comes the challenge to keep our conversation about our shared lives thoughtful and considerate. Talk about each other as you would be talked about seems a fair translation of the golden rule. Any caring community involves a lot of what I call sacred gossip. That is, filling each other in on how folks are doing, catching up, sharing stories. This means that an important part of our covenant is to take responsibility for how we listen to each other and how we react and respond and share news. There are many versions of the feather story that we just heard Megan read, but I chose that Sufi version about the gossip Aziz and the wise man Nasruddin because it contains this phrase. Nasruddin wasn't very helpful at first, having a similar problem himself. None of us are immune to sloppy speaking. The origins of the term gossip are in an old Anglo-Saxon term for godparents, actually. God sib, as in God relative, and we get our word sibling from the same root. Your god sib was kind of a spiritual relative. By the Middle Ages, the word god sib came to mean just a close friend, and somehow by the 16th century, the word god sib was being used for one who indulges in idle talk. By the 19th century, the term had come to be used as we use it today, in that kind of derogatory way. That's an interesting historical development, a term that first began as having a meaning of words shared among spiritual kin to connotations of trash talking. I find in that etymology a good warning. It's those of us who are closest, who are most prone to speak blessings on each other and to get sloppy in our conversations regarding members of the community or our family. Kathleen Norris writes, "Gossip is theology, translated into experience. When we gossip, we are also praying, not only for others, but for ourselves." That's a nice way to frame the way we talk. And so we could ask ourselves, was I just praying when I talked with that person, or was I trashing, or something in between? And how can I get closer to that spirit of prayer and blessing in my conversation? I may as well throw another word origin in here. Benediction. Benediction. From the Latin bene, good, and diction, speech. So, speaking forth of goodness. The Greek poet Hesiod warned us also in the 8th century before the Common Era. Gossip is mischievous, light, and easy to raise, but grievous to bear, and hard to get rid of. No gossip ever dies away entirely. If many people voice it, it too is a kind of divinity. And that is a really accurate take, I think, on a phenomenon that we've been witnessing lately in the many misinformation campaigns that we have seen really causing havoc in our country and our communities. It's also, though, something that we may have experienced in local community, the rumor that goes around and gets so much traction that it becomes gospel truth, the established version of events, even if it actually bears little resemblance to the truth. That's why we keep such careful minutes in church meetings, so that we can look back and see what we discussed and decided, yes, but also to maintain that consensus-based version of reality. Because, whenever a couple of people are gathered in a meeting, they're going to go forth with at least a couple of opinions about what was said and what was decided. This isn't intentional or malicious. It's just I've come to see that it's the result of the way our minds and memories process experiences differently. We actually do hear things differently. And when we get emotionally engaged with a discussion, it's even more likely that what we thought was said and agreed to at the time becomes even more divergent, like that old game of operator. Our emotional gears have been most definitely engaged around the proposed elementary school that seeks to use some of our church property for an access road or driveway. This is the Stanley School Project, and if it's your first time hearing about this, please come to our congregational meeting tonight at 7 p.m. and get caught up. It's the Stanley School Project that led me to want to address the topic of right speech. I've been in parish ministry long enough to have learned that church-town relations can be complicated very fast whenever property is involved, as various agendas, missions, and visions collide. Our Board of Trustees and our Stanley School Task Force, Doreen, Sarah, and Mark, are working very hard with town leaders, lawyers, architects, and neighbors to address the business of this matter, which is a complicated, time-consuming, and expensive. But we all have a role to play in this situation. And what the role that most of us have to play here is to remember and to consider ourselves emissaries of what the church represents as we speak amongst ourselves and with others. The community is watching us, and we need to understand that this is an opportunity to show who we are. This will be very challenging at times. Please take on that challenge. A fascinating observation that I was able to make at the emergence of the Stanley School Project is that there were already rumors swirling around about the church's negative reaction to the plan before we had even been informed about it. When anyone is tempted to become defensive, it helps to remember that human nature is really one of the universe's reliables. A local resident stopped me in the parking lot recently to say hello, and she said, with no preface, "Isn't it terrible? And I hope the church is going to fight it." It's hard when someone wants you to hook in with them and get into some really juicy stuff, but I just said, it's a big issue, and take care. See ya. I thought a lot about that language as I was driving away. Fights aren't good. The church is not in the business of being a fighter. Churches are in the business of love. So we need to be able to have necessary conversations and move through this time without aggression amongst ourselves and between our church and the town. It's a shame that people expect it, so let's not fulfill those expectations. Stay open, stay present, stay neutral and curious. I'd like to share with you wisdom from an ancient teacher, the Buddha. Here are the elements of right speech from the Heart of Buddha's Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. Number 1, speaking truthfully. 2, not speaking with forked tongue. We don't say one thing to one person and something else to another. 3, not speaking cruelly, shouting, slandering, cursing, or creating hatred. 4, not exaggerating or embellishing. We don't dramatize unnecessarily, making things sound better, worse, or more extreme than they actually are. So here are a few of my comments on these precepts. Having insider knowledge can make us feel important and powerful. But oftentimes, what we actually possess is partial knowledge. It can be just as destructive to share half truths or part of a story as it can be to outright lie, unfortunately. Our words really do have a lot of power and they spread fast. Dramatic news that riles people up can make life feel really exciting, like something is going on, but it's a bad drug. You can tell a healthy person or community partly by watching how they react to information. If they're thoughtful, if they take time to absorb what they're hearing and they ask questions and respond rather than react, that's a sign of real health. Systems that encourage or participate in reactionary, inflammatory, accusatory modes of response can be really toxic, which is why we can't take lightly our spiritual commitment to assume good or at least neutral intentions when we're tempted by those impulses of anger. I want to propose a few more categories of wrong speech that I think also constitute destructive gossip, harmful speech, to add to those that are set out by the Buddha. One is when we ascribe motives, actions, or feelings to those who aren't present to either explain themselves or defend themselves. And part of this is a really nasty practice that I call playing armchair psychologist. And that's when we decide that we have the authority to diagnose people. This can feel really satisfying, but it's actually highly unethical. Also, remember that Spanish proverb, which says, "The one who gossips with you is the one who will gossip about you." Any time that we venture to speak for someone else or report an opinion that is not our own, we are not practicing right speech. This is the kind of gossip I like to call taking someone's name in vain. And this is something that people do who don't want to put their own name on an opinion or an idea. "Oh, no, Marjorie doesn't want to go to Vegas for your party." Well, what they actually mean is, "I don't want to go to Vegas for your party." In church life, this comes out as like, "Oh, the music director doesn't like guitar music," because the person doesn't want to say, "I really hate guitar music and I don't want to hear it in worship." Very often people actually got this false information somewhere else and they're just repeating it. Human nature. Communities are actually full of this kind of misinformation. There are always a lot of games of operator being played. We just have to remember to ask, to check our sources, to talk to the person who's being talked about, and to try to maintain a sense of humor as we continue to build trust and close ties. It's humbling work, but it's really rewarding. We're in a moment of challenge, of change, of opportunity. We have strong emotions. We have opinions. We have hard conversations ahead. We very likely will have grieving to do, a lot of adjusting. It's going to be hard. But remember who we are and whose we are and what we represent. Let our speaking be benediction, speaking forth goodness into the world. The constituent congregations that merged to become the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greater Lynn have been in Lynn and Swampscott for hundreds of years, only the last 40 on our current property. The people who belonged to our congregations shaped the spirit of the wider community in their day, and we have an opportunity and an invitation to shape it still today. Let us create peace with our words as we move through this latest development together. In this moment of high emotion, let us watch over our word feathers with care. Once released, they cannot be regathered.
So